Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. The new British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, warning that Great Britain is in for tough economic times ahead, saying mistakes were made by previous Conservative Party prime ministers and that he'll work hard to earn the people's trust. Coming up, the Prime Minister and a farewell from the outgoing Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and we'll talk about the new Prime Minister and his agenda with Washington Post London Bureau Chief William Booth. 2 weeks before the U.S. election, a debate between Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis and the Democratic challenger, Congressman Charlie Crist, who is a former Republican Florida governor. President Joe Biden gets the new COVID-19 booster shot and encourages all eligible Americans to do the same, although most have not so far. In Russia, WNBA basketball star Brittney Griner loses her appeal of the 9-year prison sentence for drug possession, which involved vape cartridges with cannabis oil found in her luggage. We'll get the Biden administration reaction as efforts continue to bring Brittney Griner home, as well as another American in Russian prison, Paul Whelan. And the latest on Russia's claim that Ukraine is preparing to detonate a radioactive dirty bomb, a claim that the U.S., Ukraine, and other Western countries calls plain out false. And the U.S. Special Envoy on Climate, John Kerry, previews the upcoming United Nations Climate Summit and the role China should play in addressing climate change. We begin in London, where Rishi Sunak met with King Charles III at Buckingham Palace, the monarch asking the new leader of the majority Conservative Party to form a government, and Rishi Sunak then becoming the new prime minister. Associated Press writes that Rishi Sunak is tasked with taming an economic crisis that left the country's finances in a precarious state and millions struggling to pay their food and energy bills. He takes over for former Prime Minister Liz Truss, also from the Conservative Party, who resigned about a month and a half into her term after, again, this from AP, her package of unfunded tax cuts spooked financial markets with the prospect of ballooning debt, drove the pound to record lows, and forced the Bank of England to intervene, weakening Britain's fragile economy and obliterating Liz Truss's authority within her party. Outside the Prime Minister's residence, 10 Downing Street, we've got two speeches today from the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. First, Liz Truss.
From my time as Prime Minister, I am more convinced than ever that we need to be bold and confront the challenges that we face. As the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote, it's not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It's because we do not dare that they are difficult. We simply cannot afford to be a low-growth country where the government takes up an increasing share of our national wealth and where there are huge divides between different parts of our country. We need to take advantage of our Brexit freedoms to do things differently. This means delivering more freedom for our own citizens and restoring power to democratic institutions. It means lower taxes so people can keep more of the money that they earn. And it means delivering growth that will lead to more job security, higher wages, and greater opportunities for our children and grandchildren. Democracies must be able to deliver for their own people. We must be able to outcompete autocratic regimes where power lies in the hands of a few. And now more than ever, we must support Ukraine in their brave fight against Putin's aggression. Ukraine must prevail, and we must continue to strengthen our nation's defences. That's what I have been striving to achieve, and I wish Rishi Sunak every success for the good of our country. I want to thank Hugh, Francis, Liberty, my family and friends, and all the team at Number 10 for their love, friendship and support. I also want to thank my protection team. I look forward to spending more time in my constituency and continuing to serve South West Norfolk from the backbenches. Our country continues to battle through a storm, but I believe in Britain. I believe in the British people, and I know that brighter days lie ahead. Thank you.
Former Prime Minister of Great Britain Liz Truss outside the Prime Minister's residence in London today saying farewell. ending a tenure that ran about 50 days. The incoming Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, then went to meet King Charles III, and the palace put out still photos of the two shaking hands. King formally asking Rishi Sunak to form the new government, and then Rishi Sunak went back to 10 Downing Street, speaking in the same spot, his first speech as Prime Minister.
I will unite our country, not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours. I will always be grateful to Boris Johnson for his incredible achievements as Prime Minister, and I treasure his warmth and generosity of spirit. And I know he would agree that the mandate my party earned in 2019 is not the sole property of any one individual. It is a mandate that belongs to and unites all of us. And the heart of that mandate is our manifesto. I will deliver on its promise. A stronger NHS, better schools, safer streets, control of our borders, protecting our environment, supporting our armed forces, levelling up, and building an economy that embraces the opportunities of Brexit, where businesses invest, innovate, and create jobs. I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are. And I understand too that I have work to do to restore trust after all that has happened. All I can say is that I am not daunted. I know the high office I have accepted, and I hope to live up to its demands.
The new British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, outside 10 Downing Street. William Booth is London Bureau Chief for The Washington Post, joining us now on the phone from London with more on the new Prime Minister. Thank you so much for being here. What did you hear in the new Prime Minister's speech, giving some clues about what's ahead?
Well, the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, used the word hard several times, that this was a hard economic time, that they would have to make hard decisions. So I think he was preparing the country and signaling that, Britain's economy is in a bad spot, and they are not going to be able to slash taxes. Who knows, they might even have to raise taxes a little bit. The country's in pretty deep debt over its spending during the pandemic. So I think Sunak was signaling that these are not easy days and that he is going to be hard at work. He was very sort of serious. I wouldn't say he was somber, but this was not a first speech in which he was celebrating or gloating or painting a very rosy picture.
He also said that Liz Truss, the previous Prime Minister who just resigned, had made some mistakes, and he talked about plans to forge ahead with the Conservative Party mandate from the 2019 general election victory. So what will be different from what Liz Truss was proposing?
Well, it'll be a very, very different economic plan. Liz Truss proposed a supply-side plan. She was going to cut taxes for corporations and for high-earning individuals. but she didn't have really a plan for how that was going to be paid for. So those days are over, and Sunak, even during his leadership contest with Liz Truss over the summer, called that like fantasy island economics. He disagreed with that. He wanted to take a more prudent approach. So on economics, he will be very different from Liz Truss' proposals. On other issues like immigration, the manifesto said that they would greatly reduce the numbers of people who are allowed to immigrate. I'm not talking about illegal immigration, but any kind of immigration to Britain. And they might continue with that, maybe even taking people who arrive here illegally and then sending them to Rwanda to press their asylum claim there. There'll be other things that were from the manifesto on pushing for greener energy or pushing for more reliable sources from home, which could upend some of their promises about getting to net zero.
We're talking with William Booth from the Washington Post in London. Rishi Sunak, probably well known to people in Great Britain. He's been in politics there a while, but to people in the U.S., maybe not. Who is he?
Rishi Sunak is a dynamic guy. He's a former, in his younger days, he's only 42 now, making him, I think, the youngest prime minister in British history in the last 200 years. But he's a dynamic fellow. He was a hedge fund. He ran a hedge fund. He's a hedge funder. He was at Goldman Sachs. He went to Stanford and got his MBA. He's married to a vast fortune from India. His wife's father started the digital behemoth Infosys. So Rishi and his wife are some of the richest people in the UK today, probably worth $800, $900 million, depending on the stock prices of Infosys on any given day. He's a Hindu. That's a first. He's a person of South Asian or Indian descent, making him the first person of color. He would be also he's a Star Wars geek. And he will be known to Americans soon. He has, I think, great affinity to the United States and has said that he considers the United States Britain's greatest ally.
Rishi Sunak lost the leadership race to Liz Truss, as we mentioned, over the summer. And this time around, it was just the members of Parliament in the Conservative Party who ended up choosing him. He did use unity and stability in his speech. Given that, what's the chances he can pull this thing off?
Well, to unify the party, the Conservative Party, I guess he has to kind of be a winner and not a screw up like Liz Truss was. That will help unify the party quite a bit. I mean, the Tory Party, the Conservative Party, has many of the same fracture lines that the American GOP has. There's sort of a center wing and a right wing. There are people who are softer or harder on, fiscal policy or immigration or gun laws and all these kinds of things in the United States, and similar fractures here are in the UK. So it's a hard party to organize and to unite, as you've seen over years and years of fighting over Brexit. David Cameron got kicked out. He was against Brexit. Theresa May got kicked out. She couldn't deliver Brexit. Boris got kicked out because he was misled people and there were scandals. And then Liz Truss just got kicked out after 6 weeks because she couldn't put together a reasonable economic plan. So it's a feisty party with lots of division. So we don't know how Rishi's going to do. He seems to have a decent chance, though.
William Booth, London bureau chief for the Washington Post. Find his stories at WashingtonPost.com, and on Twitter he's at BoothWilliam. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anytime.
And President Joe Biden tweeting, "Congratulations to Rishi Sunak on becoming Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Together, I look forward to enhancing our cooperation on issues critical to global security and prosperity, including continuing our strong support for Ukraine." And the White House says that the two leaders would be speaking this afternoon. And the first Prime Minister's questions from the British House of Commons in London with the new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will be Wednesday. It will be on C-SPAN 2 television, 7 a.m. Eastern. You can follow it anywhere on the C-SPAN Now video app. And PMQs, as it's known, will be re-airing later in the day here on C-SPAN Radio. Exactly 2 weeks until Election Day in the United States. C-SPAN Network has been bringing you debates for various contests, U.S. Senate, U.S. House, governorships around the country. On Monday night, the first and only debate for Florida governor. The incumbent is Republican Ron DeSantis, and the Democratic challenger is Congressman Charlie Crist. WFLA-TV in Tampa reports that the debate, as expected, was full of fiery exchanges between the current governor and former governor. Charlie Crist was a governor. He was a Republican when he was elected then. The two traded barbs over some of the most controversial topics like abortion, immigration, education, and Florida's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Several times throughout the night, Charlie Crist accused Ron DeSantis of taking his eye off the ball and being focused on running for president in 2024. That was reporting from WFLA-TV Tampa. Here's one of those moments. It was during a question about inflation and the economy.
John in Gainesville asks, what are your plans to reduce the effects of inflation on Floridians if the federal government cannot come up with a viable solution? Governor?
Well, we know that these are the effects of the Biden-Crist policies, the worst inflation in 40 years. And Charlie Crist votes with Biden 100% of the time, and he says that Biden is the best president he's ever seen. So he's locked together with these policies that have hurt so many people throughout our state and our country. Here's what we're going to do. One, we have the 5th lowest gas prices in the country right now because we did do a gas tax holiday. We're proud of that. What we're going to do for Floridians who commute, we're going to reduce tolls by 50% statewide for all commuters in the state of Florida. We are going to make all baby items, diapers, cribs, wipes, you name it, tax-free permanently in the state of Florida so you can raise kids and get by. You know, we have a 5 and a 4 and a 2-year-old. Our two oldest are out of diapers. My wife asked me, why didn't you propose that your first year in office? Well, you live and you learn. And we're also going to say that pet food is going to be tax-free in the state of Florida. So this is going to be the largest tax relief plan in the history of the state of Florida. You're able to do that when you have a strong economy and the largest budget surplus in history, which we have right now.
Congressman, you have 1 minute.
Well, that's interesting. I would agree with your wife. You should have done that the first year you were in office. I mean, aren't you supposed to be helping us all 4 years instead of just the last year? And Ron, you talk about Joe Biden a lot. I understand. You think you're going to be running against him. I can see how you might get confused. But you're running for governor. You're running for governor. And I have a question for you. You're running for governor. Why don't you look in the eyes of the people of the state of Florida and say to them, if you're reelected, you will serve a full 4-year term as governor. Yes or no? Yes or no, Ron? Will you serve a full 4-year term if you're reelected governor of Florida? It's not a tough question. It's a fair question. He won't tell you.
We did not agree on the candidates asking each other questions. Governor, it's your turn.
Well, listen, I know that Charlie's interested in talking about 2024 and Joe Biden, but I just want to make things very, very clear. The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist. And you want to talk about standing up for taxpayers. When Charlie Crist was governor, he ran saying he would not raise taxes. He became governor, and he signed off on the largest increase in taxes and fees in the history of the state of Florida.
That's time,
we
Governor.
just enacted the largest decrease in taxes in the history of Florida.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, Ron, we know you love to bully people, and the little name-calling you just exchanged, I can take it. But you shouldn't do it when children are standing behind you at a press conference and they're wearing a mask and giving hell. But apparently that's your nature, and that's too bad. So what we need to do on the economy is make sure that we're focused on Florida. You know, he keeps talking about the Biden administration this, the Biden administration that. This is the DeSantis administration. And under the DeSantis administration, the middle class is getting crunched in Florida. You can't get an apartment. You can't afford a house. You can't pay your property insurance because he's taken his eye off the ball over and over and over again.
Thank you, Congressman.
Debate between Congressman Charlie Crist, Democrat from Florida, former governor, Republican when he served, and the current Republican governor, Ron DeSantis. Monday night, it was held in Fort Pierce, hosted by WPEC-TV West Palm Beach. You can find the full debate at our website at cspan.org, along with all the other debates we've been covering during this election season. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report with Amy Walter rates this Florida governor race as likely Republican. An article at CNN begins that election deniers are running for important offices around the country in the November 8th midterms, and some of them will win. Dozens of Republicans trying to be elected in 2022 as governor, state secretary of state, or U.S. senator have joined former President Donald Trump in baselessly rejecting or questioning the legitimacy of President Joe Biden's victory in 2020. Some of these candidates have even attempted to overturn the 2020 results. Article at CNN continues, the presence of so many 2020 deniers in 2022 races presents a challenge for American democracy. The winners could play a major role in shaping elections in 2024 and beyond. It also brings up the question of how this year's races will be decided. And a Republican commissioner on the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, Donald Palmer, was part of a panel today titled, Are We Ready to Run Our Elections? It was hosted by the American Enterprise Institute. Here's a portion.
Don, can you tell us a little bit about the post-election process? How that works, some of the issues? I mean, I'll throw one issue at you, which we talked about before, is there are a number of places now that are talking about maybe wanting to do hand counting of ballots immediately. Is that a good idea? So thinking about what happens to your ballot after, how we get to those election results. What are the issues on your mind? And then, I want to hear some of the legal and local issues as well.
So the issues after the election is, I learned in my experiences to leave a little gas in the tank, because you never know what the recount or the audit's going to find, because an election administrator is going to be exhausted and the team at the end of the day. But if you're not ready for that surprise, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And so that's the one thing I learned. But I think that generally speaking, you're preparing for potential recount. You're keeping your eyes on that. You're going to have audits in place. There were audits in place before it became vogue here, and sort of interesting for folks to focus on. There are all types of audits that take place across the country. States and localities do it a number of different ways. You may look at identified precincts. You may do risk limiting audit, which is statistical. In Florida, one of the trends that I've seen and in other states is sort of the independent audit, automated independent audit, which is really another certified system. And what I mean by certified, EAC certified or state certified, which will retabulate those ballots. And it's an entirely different system. And so if there's a discrepancy at any point, you can pick it up immediately and resolve that, so you have confidence in that election. And really that's what the audit is. And it's an audit's in place to make sure that the election administrator, the state official, the voters all feel confident that the ballots is tabulated or counted correctly. And so that's generally it. And of course, if the race is close, there'll be recounts. There may be litigation, but I think the major thing is the audit. Now, you asked about the hand count. A hand recount after an election, for example, you saw that live during the 2000 election. That was quite the scene, yes, right? Did. Now, those were just the ballots that there were questions about. Imagine going through, 15 million ballots and counting, a 5-page ballot with 10 races on it, and tabulating results that way. It would be Christmas before we have any initial results, and probably after January or February before we know who the winner is. And so, in my mind, most of the officials that look at this say it's just not, it's susceptible to voter fraud, election crimes, and corruption. It's one of those things that I think Kentucky put out a video that talked about, I think it was like 60 years ago, and it showed that when they made the transition machines, it was to mitigate and eliminate some of the corruption they had in their elections. And so it's interesting that some people are bringing that up. I think you can trust these voting machines for the following reasons. You have the EAC is charged with setting those standards with election officials for accuracy and security. They're tested in accredited labs, and finally we certify those voting machines for use for the states. The states In America, we trust but verify. So a lot of states will take that certification and then do their own testing. And then prior to an election, as you mentioned, we have logic and accuracy tests. So you literally have multiple layers of testing at all layers of government. Both political parties, nonpartisan people, but people's political party are part of that process to observe and to be a part of it, like myself. And we all want to make sure that we have a fair election. And so those are the ways that we test that voting equipment, and then we do an audit afterwards.
Donald Palmer is a commissioner on the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, a Republican. Question coming from AEI resident scholar John Fortier at today's panel on election administration hosted by the American Enterprise Institute. And this is Washington Today. President Joe Biden got his updated COVID-19 booster vaccine shot today. It's the bivalent booster that is tailored for the original coronavirus strain along with the Omicron BA4 and BA5 subvariants. It has been more than 3 months since President Biden contracted COVID, and that's the time the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that people who get COVID should wait before getting this updated booster. President Biden urging all eligible Americans to get the shot and making the case today for more pandemic response funding as winter is coming and with it the potential for a surge of cases.
I'm here today with my COVID team, as well as leaders from some of America's top pharmacies, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Albertsons. And we're here with a simple message: get vaccinated. Update your COVID vaccine. It's incredibly effective, but the truth is not enough people are getting it. We've got to change that so we can all have a safe and healthy holiday season. That's why I'm getting my shot updated today. And I think we were a little intimidated the nurse was going to give it when we told her it's on television. But at any rate, as we know, this virus is constantly changing. New variants have emerged here in the U.S. and around the world. We've seen cases of hospitalizations rise in Europe in recent weeks, and the weather is getting colder. People will spend more time indoors, and contagious viruses like COVID are going to spread considerably more easily. And as a country, we have a choice to make. Can we repeat what happened in the past winters? More infections, more hospitalizations, more loved ones getting sick, even dying from the virus? Or can we have a much better winter if we use all the tools we have available to us now?
President Biden in the Eisenhower Executive Office building today. The administration saying that more than 20 million Americans have gotten the updated COVID-19 vaccine booster shot, including nearly 1 in 5 seniors. But that 20 million or plus 20 million is less than 10% of those eligible. Eligible is anyone 5 years and older who has completed all the primary doses in a vaccine series. President Biden also announcing some new initiatives today. Walgreens teaming up with DoorDash and Uber to provide free delivery of prescriptions of Paxlovid, the oral COVID-19 treatment, directly to doorsteps. And the Health and Human Services Department launching a hashtag VaxUpAmerica family vaccine tour with pop-up COVID-19 vaccine events, including at a NASCAR race. And the president saying if you want to find out where you can get an updated vaccine shot, go to vaccines.gov. Dr. Ashish Jha, the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, who was at that event at his Eisenhower Executive Office building, later joining the regular White House press briefing, and was asked about what some are calling the tridemic or triple-demic, the possibility that surges occur simultaneously in cases of COVID, influenza, and RSV, a respiratory illness.
You mentioned the rise that we're seeing in pediatric respiratory illnesses. I think in some states right now there are limited ICU beds. 75% of hospital beds for kids are now filled. How concerned are you that this limited capacity will be stretched even more? And what can you say to parents who are concerned that they may have trouble finding care if their child has RSV or the flu or COVID?
Yeah, it's a good question. So obviously we're seeing the rise of 3 respiratory viruses, all of them going up around the same time. That's concerning. So here's the big picture. The good news is for 2 of the 3, we have vaccines that are highly effective at preventing serious illness, COVID and flu. So first thing, what I would recommend to parents, which is what I've done as a parent, is gotten my kids vaccinated, right? Because if you can get them vaccinated against flu and COVID, that takes 2 of the 3 issues off the table. It also creates more capacity in the healthcare system, and it just makes it better for everybody. On RSV is a virus that has been around forever, but it's been around forever. It is, under normal circumstances, about 90% of kids end up getting RSV at least once by the time they're 2. Because of the pandemic, some of the kind of standard patterns have been disrupted, so we're seeing a lot of RSV at once. My recommendation to parents is, for most kids, RSV is very, very mild. And my recommendation is, pretty standard stuff, right? Avoid sick contacts. If your kid is sick, keep them at home to prevent spreading it to others. Unlike COVID, which is purely airborne, with RSV, a lot of it is surface transmission, and therefore washing hands turns out to be actually quite a good thing for RSV. So basic kind of infection control, respiratory precautions goes a long way to controlling the virus. And, and again, we're looking at and we're really tracking healthcare capacity very, very closely across pediatric hospitals. And obviously, if hospitals need help, we will step in and help them to make sure that all kids across America get the care they need.
Dr. Rishi, White House COVID-19 response coordinator, getting reporters' questions in the White House briefing room. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention saying that reported cases of RSV started rising in September, and by mid-October were at their highest levels in at least 2 years. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 337, NASDAQ up 246, S&P up 61. Washington today continues in a moment.
Here are some of the live programs Wednesday on C-SPAN Radio. At 10 a.m. Eastern, White House Director of the National Drug Control Policy, Rahul Gupta, interviewed by The Washington Post. At 11 a.m. Eastern, a look at the midterm elections with a panel at the American Enterprise Institute. And at 7 p.m. Eastern, a South Carolina governor's debate between incumbent Republican Henry McMaster and Democratic challenger, former Congressman Joe Cunningham. C-SPAN Radio is 90.1 FM in the Washington, D.C. metro area, streamed at cspan.org, on the C-SPAN Now video app, and on your smart device. Say, play C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts and also on the C-SPAN Now mobile video app. A court in Russia has turned down WNBA basketball star Brittney Griner's appeal of her 9-year prison sentence for drug possession, an appeal to try to reduce or even dismiss the sentence altogether. Brittney Griner was arrested going through a Russian airport with vape cartridges containing cannabis oil, which is illegal in Russia. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan with a statement saying that Brittney Griner will continue to be wrongfully detained under intolerable circumstances after having to undergo another sham judicial proceeding today. Outside the courthouse in Khimki, Russia, near Moscow, U.S. diplomat Elizabeth Rood speaking with reporters.
Today was another sad day for the rule of law in the Russian Federation. In the case of U.S. citizen Brittney Griner, the appeals court made a slight reduction in her sentence for time served in pretrial detention, but otherwise did not change the excessive and disproportionate sentence of 9 years in a penal colony. Ms. Griner appeared by video in the trial today, so we were not allowed to communicate with her. Therefore, we will continue to request consular access so we can be in touch with Ms. Griner directly regarding her welfare, how she's doing. It is honestly tragic that Ms. Griner had to spend her birthday last week in a Russian prison rather than at home with her family and on the basketball court with her teammates. Nothing in the previous sentence, nothing in the result of today's appeal changes the fact that the United States government considers Ms. Griner to be wrongfully detained. The United States Embassy in Moscow has no higher priority than the welfare of all U.S. citizens detained in Russia, whether wrongfully detained or not. We will work very hard to ensure their fair treatment and their welfare. This is what we are here to do. Thank you.
Elizabeth Rood is the charge d'affaires of the U.S. Embassy in Russia with reporters outside the courthouse where the appeal of Brittney Griner's sentence was held. That video and audio courtesy of PBS NewsHour. The Biden administration says it is continuing to work to bring Brittney Griner home, as well as another American who the White House says has been wrongfully detained, Paul Whelan. More from the State Department briefing today with spokesperson Ned Price.
Obviously, this comes amid very high tensions between the United States and Russia. Could you say what diplomacy, if any, is still going on? Are the channels of communication still on specifically on this? You had the Secretary speaking to Foreign Minister Lavrov. Or is there some communication still just regarding her case or the case of other Americans who were detained?
There is communication regarding her case. There is communication regarding the case of Paul Whelan. The fact is, however, that this process has not moved as swiftly as we would have liked. We have certainly not gotten to the point that we would have liked by now. Brittney Griner has been in detention, wrongfully detained for the better part of a year, for some 9 months. Paul Whelan has been in detention since December of 2018, nearly 4 years. We have done everything that we have been able to do to make clear to the Russians the priority we attach to the release of Paul Whelan and to Brittney Griner. That includes the call that the Secretary made to Foreign Minister Lavrov. It was the only time Secretary Blinken has spoken to Foreign Minister Lavrov during the course of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And it sent a very clear signal that this is something we are absolutely focused on. It is something we will remain focused on until Paul and Brittney are reunited with their families. We haven't gotten into the habit of detailing specifically the nature of these conversations or specifically when and how they occur, but I can tell you they have continued, including in recent days. Our message consistently has been that the Russians should engage on the substantial proposal that the Secretary first outlined this summer, but at the very least they should engage seriously and constructively and in good faith. If that happens, we are prepared to see to it and to take steps of our own that would see Paul and Brittney reunited with their families.
State Department spokesman Ned Price. Brittney Griner's attorney telling reporters outside the courthouse today that there is one more possible appeal left in the case to the highest Russian Court of Appeals, and that appeal will happen if Brittney Griner wants it. From Associated Press, Ukraine's nuclear energy operator said Tuesday that Russian forces were performing secret work at Europe's largest nuclear power plant, activity that could shed light on Russia's claims that Kyiv's forces were preparing a provocation involving a radioactive device. The Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu made an unsubstantiated allegation that Ukraine was preparing to launch a so-called dirty bomb. President Biden asked about all this today.
Allegations from Russia as it relates to Ukraine. Do you believe that this is the beginning of a false flag operation? Is Russia preparing to deploy a dirty bomb itself or a nuclear weapon?
I spent a lot of time today talking about that. Let me just say, Russia would be making an incredibly serious mistake if we're to use a tactical nuclear weapon. I'm not guaranteeing you that it's a false flag operation yet. Don't know. But it would be a serious, serious mistake.
President Biden getting reporters' questions in the Eisenhower Executive Office building at the tail end of his event where he got the COVID-19 vaccine booster shot. This subject with Ukraine and the radioactive dirty bomb possibility also coming up at the Pentagon briefing today with Press Secretary General Pat Ryder.
So I wanted to ask about the continued pressure that Russia is putting on the alliance that Ukraine is possibly making a dirty bomb. Today, Ukraine's own nuclear energy company put out a series of statements on what they think is evidence showing that Russia is actually trying to assemble a dirty bomb and perhaps blame Ukraine, including unauthorized construction where there's spent fuel at the Zaporizhzhia facility. I was wondering if the Pentagon has seen any of this unauthorized activity too, and do you think that Russia is actually trying to plant a false flag where it would blame Ukraine but might be assembling this dirty bomb itself?
Sure. Thanks, Tara. So first of all, I've seen those press reports. I don't have any information to corroborate those claims. I will say that, again, from a U.S. standpoint, the allegations that Ukraine is building a dirty bomb are false. We have not seen at this time, though, any indication that Russia has made a decision or intends to employ nuclear weapons or a dirty bomb. But again, it's something that we'll continue to watch closely. And certainly, as others have said, there would be consequences for Russia, whether it uses a nuclear weapon or a dirty bomb. So we'll continue to keep the lines of communication open. And in the meantime, our focus from a Department of Defense standpoint will continue to be on supporting Ukraine.
Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary, at today's briefing at the Pentagon. The story from TheHill.com, top House progressives backed off their position questioning President Biden's Ukraine policy on Tuesday afternoon, withdrawing a letter released Monday that perplexed and angered many Democrats. The Congressional Progressive Caucus hereby withdraws its recent letter to the White House regarding Ukraine. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington State, the caucus chairwoman, wrote in a statement representing a stunning shift in their call for a diplomatic push to end the Russia-Ukraine war. She goes on, the letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting. As chair of the caucus, I accept responsibility for this. Because of the timing, our message is being conflated by some as being equivalent to the recent statement by Republican leader McCarthy threatening to end aid to Ukraine if Republicans take over. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every war ends with diplomacy, and this one will end too after Ukrainian victory. That statement from Pramila Jayapal, Congresswoman, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is reported from The Hill. Questions about this today to the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
There have been some assertions recently from Republicans and also from progressive lawmakers in a now withdrawn letter that the U.S. should be more actively involved in leading peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. What's the White House's response to that?
We've been very clear about that. That is up to Ukraine. That is up to the President Zelensky. There is nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. We've been very clear about that. Our job, as we see it today, as we've seen it for this past year, more than a year, is to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs on the ground as we see this war happening in Ukraine. And that's why we've provided the security assistance that we have. That's why we've provided the economic assistance and aid. And you'll continue to see that from us and from our allies. And so that is to make sure, and we're doing this to strengthen their hand, not just on the battlefield, but if they choose, if Ukraine chooses to negotiate. But again, that is up to President Zelensky, and he will make that decision for his country.
Thanks, Karine. Following up on that, did anybody from the White House ask or advise members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus to rescind that letter as they did?
I don't have any comment to make about that letter. Again, we are very appreciative to the bipartisanship that we have seen from Congress these past 8-9 months, even over a year, on the funding that we've been able to provide, the bipartisan funding that we've been able to provide. And so, the president has been also very clear. He said this recently, our support to Ukraine is a lot bigger than just Ukraine. It's about supporting NATO and all of Europe. It's about making sure that Putin is not able to succeed through his brutal actions, as we have been seeing. Our support for Ukraine will remain strong until the end of this war. And so, again, we appreciate the bipartisan effort. We're going to continue to be in conversations with members of Congress on how to continue to move forward in order to support Ukraine in their efforts. Don't have more to say about that particular letter.
The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre. John Kerry is the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, and today discussing the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Summit in Egypt, the one known as COP27. John Kerry called for the return of climate negotiations with China after China stopped those talks this summer after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. John Kerry saying a big greenhouse gas emitter like China must be part of the solution.
China emits 30% of global emissions, nearly triple the emissions of the United States. I have been and I remain unapologetic in advocating for engaging China on climate, not as a matter of ideology, but as a simple question of the mathematics I referred to. We can't solve this problem unless all of the major economies align with Paris, particularly the largest emitter. China is acting in an unbelievable pace, by the way, on the deployment of renewable energy, rapidly deploying renewables and electric vehicles, faster than anybody else in the world, mind you. But it is not acting quickly enough on CO2 or on covering all greenhouse gases in its goal. Now, last year, China committed to stop financing new coal-fired power plants in other countries, yet it continues to build more new coal power plants domestically. Last year, in the U.S.-China Joint Glasgow Declaration, China committed to release an ambitious plan by this COP to cut its methane pollution. And we had wanted to be working with them in the course of these last months. Obviously, that opportunity we lost for reasons everybody knows. But we look forward to an updated 2030 NDC from China, which accelerates CO2 reductions and addresses all greenhouse gases within their target.
John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, today at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C., looking ahead to the UN Climate Change Conference, which begins November 6th, runs through 18th in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. It's known as COP27. COP stands for Conference of the Parties, and the 27 is the 27th meeting since the first meeting in 1995. John Kerry today also talking about the U.S. position on loss and damage. An article at Axios explains it refers to industrialized countries agreeing to pay developed nations for the impacts of climate change that go beyond adaptation limits. John Kerry was careful not to commit to a specific funding mechanism at COP27, but rather to a continuing dialogue through 2023 and possibly 2024. Former U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter has died at the age of 68. His statement from his family says it was a sudden cardiac event. Ash Carter's first position in the Pentagon was in the early 1990s. He rose to be Secretary of Defense, serving from February 2015 through January 2017 under President Obama. During his tenure, he opened the military combat jobs to women, also ended a ban on transgender people serving in the military. In 2018, Ash Carter returned to the Pentagon for a ceremony to unveil his official portrait.
In troop talks, I always told them that they are what Stephanie and I woke up for in the morning. That I was so proud of them, that I was so proud to be their leader. I told them they're doing the noblest thing a young person can do with their life, which is to provide security for our people. That precious security they provide, with that, our fellow citizens can wake up in the morning, get ready for work, hug their kids, dream their dreams, live lives that are full. Those troops and DoD civilians, almost 3 million of them in every time zone around the globe, represented by some here before you in this hall, are what makes America's the finest fighting force the world has ever known. Everywhere I go in the world, leaders say they like working with American troops. And it's not just because they're awesomely capable. It's also because of how they conduct themselves and the values they embody. And that's why the United States has so many friends and allies, and our antagonists have so few or none at all. Because of them, because of those troops, because of them, America's future is secure and bright.
Former Defense Secretary Ash Carter in 2018 at his official portrait unveiling at the Pentagon. Ash Carter has died at the age of 68. He served as secretary under former President Obama, who tweeted today, "Today we mourn the passing of former Secretary of Defense Ash Carter and celebrate a leader who left America and the world safer through his lifetime of service." And current President Joe Biden also with a statement that begins, "When I think of Ash Carter, I think of a man of extraordinary integrity, honest, principled, guided by a strong, steady moral compass and a vision of using his life for public purpose. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word to get the top stories in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.